there has been a lot of back and forth online ever since it was revealed that Noam Chomsky had this relationship with Jeffrey Epstein in the files. It wasn't the first time that this was announced, but for some, it was their first time hearing it. And since we got access to these files, we were able to get more information. And it wasn't good, right? It's just, we know it wasn't good. Well, since then, Noam Chomsky's wife issued a statement about the relationship that they had with Jeffrey Epstein, I guess to clear the air. And Chris Hedges issued a response. And I think you guys need to see this. Noam Chomsky's wife apologizes for grave mistake in the Epstein ties. Let's go on here. Valerie Chomsky says Epstein had deceived them and they were careless not to thoroughly research his background. Okay, guys, brace yourself for this one. Let's go on to see what her message said here. I've watched the horrible way you are being treated. Oh, let me go back up here. Sorry. The relationship between Noam Chomsky and Epstein has been under scrutiny. Epstein came under scrutiny for sex trafficking allegations in 2019, and he did ask Chomsky for advice on how to respond. I've watched the horrible way you are being treated in the press and the media. It's painful to say, but I think the best way to proceed is to ignore it, Chomsky wrote in a message signed Noam. What the vultures dearly want is a public response, which then provides a public opening for an onslaught of venomous attacks, many from just publicity seekers or cranks of all sorts. Chomsky wrote in the message. That's particularly true now with the hysteria that has developed about abuse of women, which has reached the point that even questioning a charge is a crime worse than murder. Chomsky is one of several prominent people who were revealed to be friendly with Epstein after his 2008 guilty plea. So let's go on and show you what his wife said here. We were careless in not thoroughly researching his background. This was a grave mistake. And for that lapse in judgment, I apologize on behalf of both of us. Noam shared with me before his stroke that he felt the same way. It was deeply disturbing for both of us to realize we had engaged with someone who was presented as a helpful friend, but led a hidden life of criminal, inhumane, and perverted acts. She said Chomsky's 2019 advice to Epstein on rehabilitating his image should be understood in context. Epstein had claimed to Noam that he was being unfairly persecuted, and Noam spoke from his own experience in political controversies with the media. Epstein created a manipulative narrative about his case, which Noam in good faith believed in. It is now clear that it was all orchestrated, having us at least one of Epstein's intentions to try to have someone like Noam repairing Epstein's reputation by association. Noam's criticism was never directed at the women's movement. On the contrary, he has always supported gender equity and women's rights. What happened was that Epstein took advantage of Noam's public criticism towards what came to be known as canceling culture to present himself as a victim of it. So leftists, the left and progressive community is really struggling with this one. Now, when it was revealed a couple years ago that Noam Chomsky was hanging out with Jeffrey Epstein, I covered that on this show. At that time, Noam Chomsky's response was that he doesn't have to tell you who he's hanging out with or whatever. We're not really sure how well he was doing at that time. But it was very apparent to me that many people still didn't know about this until this recent drop in the Epstein files. Now, there has been this back and forth online with Aaron Mate and other people. Aaron apparently said, that he will never cancel Noam Chomsky, and that, at first he didn't realize what was said there. He said you can criticize, but he's not going to cancel him. People are really mad. Like, if you look at the comments, I don't know if all of you are on X, but people are really upset. And it's ultimately very revealing to me that I think a number of people are disappointed. And it happens, right? I think that some people looked up to Noam Chomsky. Some even said online they saw him as a hero. I think that's a big mistake. I tell you on the show that your heroes are the people that are in your community. The hero is you in the mirror. It's not these academics. It's not celebrities. It's not politicians. These people, everybody will let you down at some point or another. But ultimately, you have to believe that the power is within yourself. So if you don't have that trust and that energy with yourself, I think you can look at someone like a Noam Chomsky and you can start to see yourself within that person. And I think that's part of what is going on. But ultimately, Eric texted me last night about this. And Eric and I, we feel that this is a class issue as well. And I want to get into that in just a second. So after that letter from Noam Chomsky's wife, I want to show you what Chris Hedges said. Chris Hedges, also an academic, also someone who was friends with Noam Chomsky. His response was different. And I think you need to hear it. We're going to play the audio version of this.
Noam Chomsky, Jeffrey Epstein, and the Politics of Betrayal. Written by Chris Hedges for the Chris Hedges Report, chrishedges.substack.com. Read by Eunice Wong. I don't expect much from politicians, corporate tycoons, the presidents of prestigious universities, billionaire philanthropists, celebrities, royalty, or oligarchs. They live in narcissistic and hedonistic bubbles that cater to their self-worship and moral depravity. But I do expect a lot from intellectuals such as Noam Chomsky. The explanation by his wife, Valeria, Noam suffered a severe stroke in June 2023 and is incapacitated, of their relationship with Jeffrey Epstein is filled with the fatuous excuses used by all those who have been outed in the Epstein emails and documents. According to Valeria, she and Noam were overly trusting. This led to poor judgment. She writes that she and Noam were ensnared by dinners with luminaries at Epstein's mansion, flights on his private jet, nicknamed the Lolita Express, a literary reference that Noam would have recognized, financial assistance, trips to Epstein's ranch, and the use of one of Epstein's apartments in New York. Like everyone else outed in the Epstein files, she and Noam never witnessed any inappropriate behavior from Epstein or others. Noam's advice to Epstein on how to handle press inquiries into his crimes, like Noam's letter of recommendation for Epstein, was, she insists, the result of Epstein's taking advantage of Noam's public criticism towards what came to be known as cancel culture to present himself as a victim of it. After Epstein's second arrest in 2019, she and Noam were careless in not thoroughly researching his background. She ends by expressing unrestricted solidarity with the victims. Her letter regurgitates the formula of everyone outed in the Epstein files. I know and have long admired Noam. He is arguably our greatest and most principled intellectual. I can assure you he is not as passive or gullible as his wife claims. He knew about Epstein's abuse of children. They all knew.
I don't think that this was something that was easy for Chris Hedges to write. In fact, if I were to imagine, some people are upset with Chris Hedges after this article and his Substack. They've been coming after him online as well. But I would have to imagine this probably was not an easy thing for him to do. But according to Chris Hedges, he said that they did know. He said they all knew who he was and what he was about. Let's go on a little bit more here.
And like others in the Epstein orbit, he did not care. From the email correspondence between Epstein and Valeria, it appears she particularly enjoyed the privileges that came with being in Epstein's circle. But this doesn't absolve Noam's acquiescence. Noam, of all people, knows the predatory nature of the ruling class and the cruelty of capitalists, where the vulnerable, especially girls and women, are commodified as objects to be used and exploited. He wasn't fooled by Epstein. He was seduced. His association with Epstein is a terrible and, to many, unforgivable stain. It irreparably tarnishes his legacy. If there is a lesson here, it is this. The ruling class offers nothing without expecting something in return. The closer you get to these vampires, the more you become enslaved. Our role is not to socialize with them. It is to destroy them.
Woo!
That was Noam Chomsky, Jeffrey Epstein, and the Politics of Betrayal.
Well. I think I pronounced her name wrong, Valerie. I always want to say Valerie. So that was the article from Chris Hedges, his response to Valeria's statement about Noam Chomsky's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. And going into this, when I started covering this latest drop of files, I warned everybody, if you got any heroes or idols, put that aside. Because it's a lot going on up in those files, and you never know who's going to be in there, and you may become, disappointed, etc. But, Eric texted me this last night about this being a class issue, and I really got to thinking. I was, part of me got angry when I was seeing some of the tweets. I still call them tweets. Sorry, I was seeing some of those tweets. It seemed like to me that some people were fighting harder for Noam Chomsky than they were for the victims. I saw people who haven't said one word about Epstein victims all of a sudden had a lot to say about their defense for Noam Chomsky. And I think that said something to me. The class issue, there seems to be this idea that if someone is an academic, if someone is, higher up there in the class, like spectrum or whatever, but let's focus on the academics here for just a second, because I worked in that space. There seems to be this facade that if someone is an academic, they can't do anything wrong. I saw it when I worked at MIT. I saw it when I worked at Boston University. I saw it when I worked at Harvard. And this isn't something that is just on the left or the right or whatever. It's not just something that's within the YouTube political space. I saw these things in person via my job. And I think sometimes it's like if someone tends to be a part of a certain class, especially in the academia spaces, these faculty members that are teaching at these prestigious universities. Noam Chomsky he taught at MIT. You get to keep your office at MIT as faculty, by the way. If you're emeritus, you still get to keep it there. And especially the ones that come from MIT, it just seems to be this idea that this is a brilliant mind. How dare you question what they've said or what they've done? And it's almost as if if you're part of the lower class, that you should be thankful and grateful that someone who is in this class above you, this great intellectual mind, is sharing with you freely what they've discovered and what they've learned. I appreciate Noam Chomsky's work about manufacturing, consent. I think that woke a lot of people up, right? But that doesn't mean that he can't be wrong. That doesn't mean that he can't be criticized. And what was worrisome to me is that I saw people online acting in such a way that because this is the great Noam Chomsky, how dare you critique or criticize him? And no one is immune to criticism. That's something I'll tell you on this show. So that worried me. And I am seeing people double down. And it's just, I don't know what's going on with Aaron, but Aaron said that he would never cancel him. He I guess looked up to him, went to this whole spiel and things like that. Okay, and it is what it is. But it was just like almost as if you can't separate their past work from behavior. So you can criticize and take issue with his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. That doesn't mean that you didn't learn something from manufacturing consent. Does that make sense? And I feel like people just can't separate the two. It's like they feel like they lost their hero. They lost like their, and again, these heroes and idols, you got to toss that aside. There's too many people, I think, looking up to people that it's just, I mean, at the end of the day, Noam Chomsky is human just like everybody else. Do I think it was good for him to have this relationship with Jeffrey Epstein? No. Do I believe Valerie's letter, everything that she said? No. Because one of the things that was mentioned was that 2015, they weren't aware of Epstein's crimes or whatever. I was aware of Epstein's crimes in 2015. It was on the media. And as you'll see further on, we're going to show you more information here that supports my claim about that. One of the other things that was mentioned in 2017, this wasn't just like a working relationship, because again, like I said, these files are revealing a lot of things. One of the emails that's in the file says, "Dear Jeffrey, we count you as our best friend. I mean, the one. It is always great to see you. Valeria." So this is not just someone that was an acquaintance or someone they were friendly with. According to this email, a best friend. And then you can point fingers towards like Woody Allen as well. Okay, let's say he did not know anything about Epstein's crimes, which again, I just find hard to believe because like I said, in 2015, I saw it on the news myself. But you knew about Woody Allen. Also predatory. That's why I said, like, don't build these people up as heroes. Counterpunch sent this to me as well. I wanted to include this. I think this is a good thing to add. The simplest explanation is that Epstein worked hard to manipulate and befriend Chomsky and his wife by offering them financial services and at one point offering them a place to live. Meanwhile, Chomsky was particularly vulnerable to such offers because he found himself in a highly distressing family dispute over money, a dispute that the 89-year-old described as the worst thing that's ever happened to me. So obviously, this is something that Jeffrey Epstein took advantage of, right? But what Counterpunch pointed out here was that apparently, allegedly, Epstein offered Chomsky and his wife financial services and at one point offered them a place to live. And this is the first that I had heard about that. Right. So you, again, like I said, Epstein seemed to find people that were in like these compromising positions and I can come in and help you. He did that with some of the victims too, right? Like I'll pay for your schooling if you do this, that type of stuff. I'll take you out of that environment. Another person sent me this and I didn't realize this, but this is something else that I think needs to be a part of this discussion. This goes back to 2016. Noam Chomsky on Trump's rise and why he's not sure Bernie Sanders is right about breaking up the banks. See, I didn't catch this at that point in time, but this was during an interview. And I want to show you what he said here. Objectively, poverty and suffering were far greater, but even among working people and unemployed, there was a sense of hope that is lacking now, in large part because of the growth of a militant labor movement and also the existence of political organizations outside the mainstream. Of course, another way of putting it would be that Trump himself has created a political movement that is outside the mainstream and is giving people hope that they can make America great again. The other fun moment in the interview is when Chomsky declines to endorse Bernie Sanders' proposal to break up major Wall Street banks. The consequences should be carefully explored, Chomsky says. I haven't done so. So I did not know about that. And that's on me. But I think that says something. Guess I just wasn't paying attention enough. So that part there is interesting. Something else that Max Blumenthal pointed out here, Chomsky was mid-gesture mixing with Oud Barak. It doesn't make sense for a left critic of power to line with an Israeli genocide gooner and get mogged by Davos Moids, escorted by teen Foids on Epstein Island. So this is something that Max Blumenthal was pointing out. Noam Chomsky here with Oud Barak, who is absolutely despicable. Not just from the victim, Virginia Giuffre's perspective, which she talked a lot about Oud Barak in her book. And she said that he was one of the most violent ones, that he viciously attacked her. But she went on to say about him that she was afraid that she was not going to survive. That's how violent he was towards Virginia Giuffre. But it's not even just that. This is someone who was very, 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 and still is very, very genocidal, even in the rhetoric. And then I saw this picture again. I didn't know these things. I saw this picture and I thought to myself, you know, I remember when Chomsky said he didn't support BDS, boycott, divest, and sanction. And I don't know, I just started thinking about some things. And then I saw this on Bad Faith Podcast. You guys should watch this interview when you have some time. This is Bree talking to Alan McLeod. He's talking about this relationship with Epstein and Chomsky as well.
Right up until his arrest and a death in prison, Chomsky was actually advising Epstein, being like an unofficial crisis manager. He was sympathizing with Epstein, talking about, this is a quote, "the horrible way you're being treated in the press and public." On multiple occasions, Chomsky expressed his desire to visit Little St. James Island, which is, of course, the site of Epstein's most infamous sex crimes. We know Chomsky flew on the Lolita Express at least once, and that flight was actually from Boston to New York to attend a soiree with Epstein and Woody Allen. And Epstein, in the emails, calls his jaunts with Woody Allen a pedophile convention. That's a specific quote. Chomsky met with a host of other highly questionable figures, thanks to Epstein, including Steve Bannon, Woody Allen, as I said, Ehud Barak. Chomsky considered Epstein a dear friend and his closest financial, legal, and sometimes even moral advisor. He regularly exchanged gifts with Epstein. And one of the saddest things that really came out of reading these emails, which really show just how deep this friendship is that, you know, quite frankly, Epstein might have been Chomsky's closest friend in the 2010s. His relationship with his children actually broke apart, mostly because of their protests over his attempts to name Jeffrey Epstein's accountant and right-hand man to the board of his family's trust, which oversees the Chomsky's fortune that he's built up from all the book sales, etc., and that the family go through. Epstein is advising Noam to cut his children off from the funds, and it seems that some of the last emails suggest that Noam went with Epstein's advice. Another thing that comes out, which people haven't been talking about, is how Noam really comes across as someone like a very sort of reactionary figure in some of his beliefs. You know, publicly, he's this great anarchist intellectual, but privately, if you read his emails to Jeffrey Epstein, he comes across as this sort of anti-feminist guy that's very similar to the sort of speeches that Jordan Peterson or Ben Shapiro give, you know. He described Me Too and the modern feminist movement as, and I'm quoting here, hysteria that has developed about abuse of women, which has reached the point that even questioning a charge is a crime worse than murder. He called feminists asking questions about Lawrence Krauss and Jeffrey Epstein. He called them, he likened them to Nazis. So he said that, you know, our culture is unfortunately swept by craziness. Nazism is a good example of this, or the Great Awakening. We're in one of those phases now, he says. If there's a charge, it's true. In fact, it's true. Any response is mansplaining, quote unquote. Another power play reinforcing the charge. You've seen what happened to Lawrence Krauss. Full and complete response amounts to zero. It isn't even considered. It's like trying to discuss rationality with religious fanatics. So, you know, Noam has this public persona, but in private, he is defending the world's most notorious sex criminal.
Watch that full interview when you get a chance. It's on Bad Faith podcast. That was a really good one there. And there's another one that she did. I think his name is Gabriel. I can't remember his last name. That's also on Bad Faith. And that guy, he talked about how some of these spaces have been captured to basically make an ineffective left. And I thought that was a very good discussion. Definitely check that out as well. Miss Sparkle said, I'm speechless, Sabby. Yeah. You know, guys, when these things happen, it can be very, you know, I think people are disappointed. I think a number of people are shocked, surprised. And, you know, I have a string here. It's going to bother me. Okay, it's gone. I went through a number of those files. And as I was going through them, I said to myself that I'm gonna have to tell people, if you got any heroes or idols, you need to put that aside going into those files. And there's more information that I'm seeing every day. And so, you know, a lot of times I say on this show, we don't really know these people. Well, in this case, I mean, there were people who did know Noam, right? Like Chris Hedges knew him, and, you know, Aaron Mate knew him. I guess sometimes even if you do know people, you may not know, you know, everything like about them or what's going on and all these types of things. Noam Chomsky is not in a position where, you know, he can do interviews from what I understand. But I think it definitely could not have been easy for Chris Hedges to write what he wrote. And I think that he is one that really understands the class dynamic of things a lot. The first time he came on the show, that's what we were talking about. And I don't know, like I felt that energy. I felt that energy online, like the people who were saying, no, this isn't right, and criticizing Noam. It almost kind of came across as though the response seemed to be, you should just shrug it off and accept it or whatever, because this is one of the greatest minds of our time. And that made me feel some type of way. And that's why I say I feel like this is a class issue, where it's like us little working class folk, I guess we should just be happy that he shared the information with us that he did. And I don't believe that anybody is above criticism. I think that there's always room for improvement. And I am one of those people that is very supportive about feedback as well. And I think that we have to be very careful if we get to a point where we just I love this person, so no one can criticize them. We have to be careful about that. And two, when you say what to expect, what I expected from this latest dump of Epstein files was to hear more people, you know, rage and anger about the victims and the abuse that happened and what these women went through. What I didn't expect was for people who have said absolutely nothing about the victims to go so hardcore defense for Noam Chomsky. That is very weird to me. And I think we have a lot of work to do as a society. Hey guys, this was a Sabby clip. If you like what you saw, hit that like button and subscribe.